Hi, this is Kelly Hill, technology reporter for RCR Wireless News. I'm here today with David Smith, who is Director of State and Local Government for Citrix, and we are going to be talking about a new mobility report that was recently published. This was done through Mobile Work Exchange, which is a public-private partnership that focuses on mobility for government workers. Welcome, David.
Thanks for having me.
Great. So this report is the state and local mobility map, the road to mobile readiness. For anybody who wants to read the full report, it's available at mobileexchange.com. And so let's talk a little bit about, maybe you can start off with some of the key takeaways.
Yeah, we're seeing a growing use of mobility in state and local government. I think we're seeing small tasks being taken over with some mobility use cases. I think that there's a small number of workers able to actually telework, work remotely at least some portion of the time. But I do think that there's still a lot to be done. While organizations are starting to dip their toe into mobility, I think really to say that they're mobile ready yet is still limited, and that equates to really, what's their overall mobile strategy, and have they actually come together with a full strategy of how they're going to handle mobility in the future, not only for simple things like email, but more I guess citizen service related tasks.
Okay. Now, just getting into some of the figures, I think that the survey found that 58% of agencies said that they weren't mobile ready, but at the same time, 35% of them had matured their mobile strategy in the past year. So those are some interesting numbers there that I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about, given those numbers, how would you describe the momentum in this area?
So I think that people are starting to see that, hey, we're going to need to use mobile phones, tablets, mobile devices in general to do more, accomplish more business tasks with them. However, exactly how they're going to do that, I think, is yet to be determined, right? So they, can I have mobile email? Can I do small tasks, mobile via a mobile device? Yeah, I can start to do those things. And have I started to look at a strategy of how I'm going to manage those devices and make sure that any information on them is going to be secured? Those are things that people have started to look at, but not really taking the broader look at, hey, I've got to build an assumption into my IT strategy that users are going to be mobile, and how do I handle that big picture? I think that that's where people still need to advance.
Okay. So what type of technologies or mobility support or enablement did the survey find out was being invested in?
So a bunch of different things. There's device management, mobile device management, which I think is usually where people start, because when you look at it on the surface, especially at a government layer, right, they're very concerned about the edge device and what's the security of the edge device, especially if there's going to be any type of personal information or government information on those devices. So how do I secure those devices, and how do I make sure that, hey, if that device falls into the wrong hands, can I wipe it, and remove the data that might be on that device? But other technologies that kind of fit into that is a broader space of mobile application management. So how do I, maybe look at a BYO device and separate what might be personal information on a device versus what is a government-owned piece of information on a device, and how can I sandbox those? And then the other technology that's looked at here is some use of virtualization. So can I virtualize an application and deliver it to a mobile device? In a model that the application actually doesn't run on the device, it runs in the data center, and it's a view of the application that's on the device, which is it's a way to secure the application, provide a efficient means of delivery, while not providing the endpoint as a risk, as a potential risk factor.
Okay. And this report, I thought, was interesting in terms of looking at the role that mobility can play in emergency preparedness. And you'll have to excuse me. COOP, Coop, the acronym.
Coop, Continuity of Operations.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about that. What it is, what it means for government, and the role, how mobility ties in with that.
Sure. So I think that in some organizations that are well developed, their mobile strategy, their Coop strategy, and even what they do in other disaster recovery type scenarios are all kind of intertwined. When I look at mobile, in my mind, if I'm making an assumption that a user is going to be remote, and I do that in how I build my IT infrastructure, it makes it easier to handle a scenario where a user is displaced if they're not in the office. Whereas if you kind of have a separate continuity of operations strategy from your mobility strategy, you run into the situation of, hey, it's not a system that the users use every day. It's something that's new, and the worst possible time to try to learn how to do something new or try to remember how to do something new is at a time you're displaced. So, and I've seen strategies where government workers keep laptops in their trunk of their car in the case that they can't work or things like that. And they turn it on the first 2 hours is downloading updates that haven't been updated in the last 6 months. So, that's why having a mobile strategy that is tied to how you handle Coop, how you handle disaster recovery is important, because it's how the users start to work day to day, and therefore they're not trying to do something new at the time that there's some other way, other need to work remotely.
Okay. I thought it was interesting that this report also did a nice job, I think, of quantifying the additional hours of productivity for mobile workers when you actually get these things in place. Can you tell us a little bit more about that part of the findings?
Sure. So when you look at mobility, especially in the area of citizen service, right, is government is looking for ways to improve the efficiency of, hey, can I handle or can I do more in the same amount of time? And so I'll use somebody like a social worker, right? Is that if a social worker can be out in the field and see more people in a day, that's much more efficient citizen service. And so when it comes to mobility and implementing mobility solutions, right, is if I could, instead of having a social worker have to go to an office in the morning, download the cases, print out the cases that they needed to do in the day, then go out and visit people, and then go back to the office at the end to fill out paperwork, right? That's pretty inefficient as far as how they can actually get out and visit the individual constituents. So, leveraging mobile technology, I can spend lots more time doing my core job function than doing the admin pieces that might be required to go to an office today. And the same thing can work in a lot of other areas. And you imagine a transportation worker that has to go to an office to get a job, set of jobs to go out to the field. That, hey, it may be a 2-hour drive between where the office is and where the actual field work is taking place. And how mobility can help in improving that overall efficiency.
Okay, great. So one more question, kind of looking forward, and what the IT managers who were surveyed in this had to say about needs for moving forward with increased mobility. So what did they have to say about what they saw as necessary in order to move forward?
Yeah, so I think that looking at the big picture, as I mentioned before, is probably the biggest thing that has to happen. There's a readiness gap that exists out there between how people work today and how they might work in the future, and some of that is technology driven and some of that's policy driven. We saw in the federal government when telework started to ramp up in the federal government that there was some manager retraining that had to happen, right? Looking at, is a worker actually working if they're sitting at their desk, or is a worker being productive because they meet certain job tasks in an individual day? And so managing by performance versus managing by presence becomes an important piece of driving mobility forward. But then I think from an overall IT approach and an IT manager perspective, to go back to the original question, right, is that if I'm looking at a lot of the systems that the government customers are dealing with today were built 15, 20 years ago, where the assumption was I was going to be at my desk, I was going to be wired to that desk, I had a single machine that I used all the time, and that's how I worked. And over time, what we did is we built in exceptions to that rule. Okay, I need remote email through a BlackBerry. Okay, I built a new system to do that. Oh, I need to remotely access the network. Okay, I built in a VPN solution to do that. And so we built in over time a lot of exceptions into the network for what really today should be the assumption, right? The assumption should be a user probably going to have to be mobile. They're probably going to use multiple devices. And because of that, we need to transform the way IT looks at planning projects at the beginning. And if you do so, then the guy that works in the office is a pretty easy use case, right? It is the guy or girl that's sitting at their desk. They're just another user. They're not a special use case, whereas mobile users are kind of a special use case today.
Okay. Great. Well, David, thanks so much for your time. I've been talking with David Smith, who is Director of State and Local Government for Citrix. If you are interested in reading the full report, that's available at mobileexchange.com/mobile readiness. This is the state and local mobility map road to mobile readiness report that we've been talking about today. Thanks so much, David. We appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.